Okay, so in this video we're going to go through what the data flows are. We're going to do a deep dive, but for those of you that just want to know what it is, without all the details, I am going to do a quick explanation in the beginning and then we will fill in the gaps as we go along. To do this, I am going to go through basically the data flows in Power BI white paper. I'm going to link down below in case you haven't seen it. But I think this is a great explanation of what data flows are. I've been hearing the word data flows for a long time. I haven't been able to understand what it is. I think I got it. Let's see. I will be writing here on the tablet also, or on the computer, so to do some diagrams and some flows, and you will see that below. So if you see me right here, you know what I'm doing. And data flows. What is it? Data flows, very shortly explained, is like Power Query Online. And then you might wonder, okay, so why Microsoft has not called it Power Query Online? You might wonder. Well, it's not just Power Query. So data flows uses Power Query, but it does a lot of things that Power Query does not do. And this is one of the things that we will see when we go through the white paper. But surely explain, the way I understand data flows is as follows. So you have a bunch of data sources. Let's pick a pen. So we have a bunch of data sources. We have, Dynamics, for example, like data source. And then we have some Excel budgeting workbook. And then we have Salesforce. Okay, so those are the data sources. The data lives in their, proprietary source, as usual. And now, what we've been doing up to now, we have the Power BI service here. This is Power BI service. So this is, the cloud service, the one that lives up there. And we've been consuming these sources. Let's put in another color. We've been consuming these sources in there, okay? So data flows, because it's the Power Query Online, will allow you to consume this service through that. So here we will have Dataflow 1. And Dataflow lives in a workspace, so you will have here workspace 1, and then you will have here workspace 2. And here we will have one data flow, here we will have another data flow, and here we will have, for example, another data flow. Okay, so a data flow lives in a workspace and it pulls data from the different data sources using Power Query M. Great. So you can combine data flows, and the output of the data flow is actually, let's write the next box, which is here, is the Azure Data Lake Generation 2. So your data gets moved from the source to a data lake, and it gets stored in what they call it a common data folder. So this creates another CMD. And the CMDs are composed with, small entities or tables, as they call it on the white paper, which are like CSV files with metadata. So here we have the tables that we have pulled through the data flows into the Azure Data Lake, and the same with here. Something else that is available is, because everything now is in Azure and is in the cloud, there is a bunch of services in Azure that is meant to be for managing data, for data analysts, data scientists. And because everything is in the cloud now, you have actually the possibility to access that data lake pool through, for example, Azure Machine Learning. You have SQL Data Warehouse. you have Databricks, you have Data Factory, all kinds of services that can actually go in and create its own CMD folders that can then be consumed to Power BI. Okay? So, looking at this picture, what is a data flow? A data flow allows you to connect to data sources. It pulls the data, it transforms it, and then it pulls it to an Azure data lake, where it gets stored, refreshed, and it can be used. And that it can be reused through Power BI, or you can, use all the data tools that are available in Azure. And create entities. And, suddenly within Microsoft ecosystem, data can be easily used and the tools be easily pulled also. So the data is not just limited to Power BI. So what do you think? That is basically what a data flow is. It does not store any data by itself, it just pulls, transforms, and sends, and then orchestrates the actual pulling of data, so it gets done correctly. And because everything is moved to Azure Data Lake, you have other benefits of that. So there is a short explanation of data lakes. Now, let's go into the white paper. I think it's a great white paper. It's not technical at all. It is, I think, easy to understand, and it's very well written. So I recommend you to read it, no matter, even if I'm going to go through it here. So you can also make your own conclusions about things, okay? Because I'm obviously interpreting this through my point of view. So here it says, data preparation is considered the most difficult, expensive, and time-consuming in the analytics and BI projects. And it says that this new data flow capacity can change the time, cost, and expertise required for data preparation in a fundamental way. It says Dataflow has a model-driven calculation engine that will cut the cost, time, and expertise required for cleaning data. And we will talk a little bit more about that, what that means. And it goes to talking about the self-service revolution, how vendors start to move from IT BI-centric to, self-service BI, where, users can just go and grab and use, instead of having to contact IT for their business intelligence needs. And it says that Microsoft, through Power Pivot, DAX, and Vertipack, they actually responded to that self-service market. And it says here, a decade later, allows tens of millions of Excel and Power BI users to enjoy BI technologies, work with massive amount of data, work with the scale, sophisticated large models, without any formal BI training. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think you need to have training in order to especially work with massive amounts of data and create sophisticated models. It requires training. But you can do a lot of things without knowing that much. I give them that, actually. So it says, okay, that is great, but the actual data preparation, there are not a lot of vendors that have tools for that. And then it says until now, because now we have data flows. And it says data flows are created and managed in the Power BI service, and it is directly in the browser. So it is the Power BI, Power Query Online, where you clean the data. And it goes saying there, yes, you have now Power Query, but there are some limitations to the Power Query that is in Power BI. The first one is that the data that you get, importing into Power BI is locked in Power BI. So you cannot reuse that data that has been cleaned elsewhere. Which I'm not sure I really agree with that, because, you can export Power BI data through different tools. I know there are limitations. You can export billions and trillions of rows of data. And in that case, this is true. It's just a Power BI tool. But there are ways to do it if you're not working with that much data. This is another indication that Dataflows is for enterprise and companies that have a lot of data. Okay, that is what this is meant for. Second, managing complex data transformation at scale is difficult, and here is meaning, when you have all these BI projects where you're pulling data from a lot of sources, and you have to make sure that the data is synchronized and the steps are done in the correct order, so the data at the end is correct. That is something that you can do a mini version of it in Power BI, but Power BI is not the tool for that. And then it says that all data needs to be ingested through Power Query connectors, which makes for challenging work when working with large volumes of data. So, okay. Now, it goes on and says that for large-scale, complex, and reusable data preparation projects, Dataflow is the thing, right? So this is for, again, large-scale, complex, and when you want to have reusable data. So note that. And it says data flows are to ETL. ETL is the actual cleaning process, what Excel is to programming. And it says here that handling, extracting data from one table or one database and then putting everything together and doing that in Power BI is very easy. But when you are creating a system of, extracting from multiple systems at the same time and doing a lot of transformations, that might be a bit challenging. So large-scale Power BI does not work. And it says data warehousing experts create ETL packages that handle the extract and transformation tasks, and then they have to do this, again, orchestration they call it, but it's basically the syncing of the data flows so things get done in the right order. For example, if you have a data that you upload every day, fresh data, and then you move the data to historical data, you have to make sure that if you are going to delete this table, this doesn't get deleted before you actually move to the historical table, so that has to be synchronized. And it says that a significant ETL project includes hundreds and even thousands of ETL packages that has to be chained together with complex logic. And this is, something that Dataflows can help you with. It says data service flows are for self-service ETL by business analysts. Self-service ETL by business analysts. I don't know the definition of a business analyst. I don't know if there is like this is it, or people use it differently. The business analysts I know don't do this type of work. It's more like data warehouse people. That's what I've seen. But let me know your comments in the comment box. For me, that's like people that, they build data warehouse and they put big databases together to make it accessible for different reporting stuff. That kind of work. Maybe that is a business analyst. I don't know. So it says, Dataflows is going to, it has been designed around 5 principles, that is intuitive and familiar authoring through Power Query. Again, the orchestration of the flows, allow you to work with a lot of data, big data. You have the common data model. We'll talk about that in a second. And then the complete native integration with the rest of the Power BI system, with the dataset, dashboards, reports, and also with all the Azure bits. It says data flows are like Excel. And the analogy goes like this. In Excel, every cell that has a value has a formula. And when you write in a lot of formulas in Excel, every time you write a new formula that is referencing other formulas, you always get the right data. Even if it's like referencing the reference that is referenced with, these massive Excel files. And the way that works is that Excel has a diagram that maps all the formulas that you have available in Excel file, and it just tells Excel, first is this formula, then this one, that one, and then that one, and then that one. So it actually does all that in the background. You never need to worry about if Excel is going to give you the right values. It just does, always. And you don't have to even think about it. How does that work? maybe some of you have, but what is happening is basically that. It's mapping everything, and then it just follows the map to be able to refresh everything and to give you the right values every time. And they say that Dataflow works exactly the same way in Excel and is being designed to work exactly the same way. So it creates a map, and then it just follows the map to be able to update everything correctly, without you having to do anything exactly like in Excel, which is fantastic for those that are doing that type of job. It says, as in Excel, Dataflow's entities, they call it. Okay, let's start with that. They say Dataflows define a collection of entities, and they say entities is like tables. So Dataflow will generate tables on these, I'll show it here, on this common model CMD folder. So here is creating those small things are the entities or the folders, or the tables, I mean. Okay, so one Dataflow can generate many entities or tables. I think table is a better word, actually. And each Dataflow has a formula associated with it. So you have each small thing of this has a M expression behind. So he's using the Power Query language to do it. And each one of these has one M code, or M expression that tells, what it needs to be done and how things need to be cleaned. And it says it is more powerful than the Excel formulas because you can do more things. You can join tables, you can pivot tables, you can filter and aggregate tables, you can do exactly anything you need. And then it goes, the magic of M expression. It says learning M, it might seem like a significant burden and a high bar for most analysts, but M is very powerful, and it says that you are already authoring very complex M expressions through Power Query. And all the demos I have seen with Dataflows, what people do is they actually create the query in Power Query, they copy the M code, and then they paste it in Dataflow. Because I don't think that people are used to write M just as M. You just use the interface and then you tinker with the code. I have, by the way, a course on M and a Power Query. Just go and check them out in case you want to learn more about those. So it says, okay, we're already doing a lot of M, and he says when authoring Dataflows, you have all the magic of M and Power Query within the Power BI service in the Power Query Online experience. So you're using Power Query Online to be able to, create those transformations. But it's happening a lot more than that, and that's why they are not calling it just Power Query Online. He says the Dataflow calculation engine, it is not the same as the M engine. And they say we established that every Dataflow table has an M expression, and that M expression can refer to other tables in the Dataflow. So you can have tables relating to tables in the Dataflow. It says, like Excel, the Dataflow calculation engine analyzes the M expression of each table, finds a reference to the tables using that expression, and use that information to build a dependency graph. That's what we were talking about Excel. And this you've seen in Power BI before. Sorry, I'm sure you can see, you recognize that diagram. It's just, the query dependency flow that you see in Power Query. And this is a way that Power Query instructs the Dataflow to actually execute the different refreshes, which is great. It says it decides if it should be done in parallel or, well, it's just orchestrating everything, how everything should be refreshed. And it's done everything behind the scenes like in Excel, so you don't have to worry about it. It says for projects that have dozens of tables or more, these multiple data flows are created and managed in a single Power BI workspace. And it says when you have large and complex data projects, this is the way to actually do it. It goes through how the actual execution is doing and what type of refresh you have available. Let's see. One of the things that they mentioned here is that you can have different refresh schedules for. So, for example, this data flow can refresh once a day, while this data flow can refresh once a month. So, for example, the budget, you do budgeting once a month, so you'd only need to refresh it once a month, while the other one can refresh once a day, and the data flow will know how to refresh this in a way that you always get accurate data on the store on the Azure Data Lake, which is great. It says if failure occurs while processing, it will pick it up from when it failed, so it will not do everything again. What else it says? Data flows can refer to tables owned by data flows managed in other workspaces, so you can this data flow can refer to entities produced by that data flow. And it says in many ways it works basically like in Excel. Well, when you are in a cell and you're referring to other cells, so you have a mind picture of how that works. The type of refreshes that are allowed, you have manual refresh of data. You have the schedule refresh, and there's different schedule refreshes for pro license or premium license. I'll show you a table at the end. And you have even the external refresh data sets. It says data flow can also refer to data that is not owned by the workspace. And in that case, a data flow that refers to the external data proactively looks for changes in the data. If it finds changes, it triggers the refresh. Okay? And then you have incremental updates, and it says that with incremental updates, data flows can ingest only new data or change data instead of, processing everything, which you can imagine what a pain that is. It says data flows on the data lake. So as I mentioned before, the data flows store the tables in a Azure data lake. And here's the thing, you have 100 terabytes of, you have 100 terabytes of free data storage for premium. And you have 10 gigabytes only or free for Pro. So basically, if you have a Pro, you are going to use more than 10 gigabytes of data storage. I'm sure of that. So after that, you pay. It doesn't say here how much it costs, but I guess there is a calculator somewhere on Azure that we can go and check. I don't know. I don't know if they have released any pricing. What I read before was that it was free, but it's not free. It's just the initial storage. Many users will never have to be aware of the underlying data lake. I guess it's good that you're aware that your data is being moved. And then you have, data privacy laws. Where is that data lake at? Is in Europe, stays in Europe, or, all that kind of stuff. I'm guessing that it stays in the same local region. I can only imagine that. It doesn't say here, though. So I don't know. It says open approach, then it's talking about, what we mentioned here about the Azure, other Azure packages, which is great. So it allows you to connect to Azure Data Factory, Databricks, SQL, so they can create their own CDM, and then you can access them through Power BI. We've talked about that already. And they say that these small entity tables are actually CSV files with metadata. And they have an entire appendix about this CMD folder, CDM folder. And I'm not going to touch on that on this video. Let me know if you want me to do a review on that. But I don't want to make this way too long. It's already quite long as is. So security, this is quite important. It says data process, Power BI uses a ACL standard that allows you to not only give security for the data set, but it allows you to give you security row level, through entity level. That is not supported, row level security is not supported by the Azure Data Lake yet. So this is what it says. It is highly recommended to restrict access to the Dataflows entity only to analysts whose job is to create the Power BI data sets. Okay? So give access to the data lake to the people that are creating the data flows and nobody else, because you won't be able to restrict what they see in there. And why risk it, right? And they say it twice, so just don't. Then it says Dataflow Power BI Pro versus Premium. And it says Dataflows are available both for Pro and Premium, but there are differences. And one of the differences I already mentioned is the 100 terabytes versus 10 gigabytes data lake storage for free. It says there is a table on page, in case you want to check it out, it's page 16. I'll show you also on the side. And that table, it just shows you the difference between Power BI Pro and Premium when it comes to data flows. It says connectivity all for both, the storage, we talked about it. Oh, sure, for Premium, the storage is 100 terabytes for P1 or graded nodes. It says data injection, it says serial, while with Premium it's parallel. No incremental update, so it will load everything every time, but 10 gigabytes. Reference to entities in the same workspace, not available for Pro, it is for Premium. Reference to entities across workspaces, not available for Pro. Calculation engine, not available. Which, that is the thing with data flows that is not Power Query. So basically not really, but for the Pro users, you don't have the calculation engine that, orchestrates how things get executed and clean and transform and move to the data lake. So you have a Power Query online experience up there, but your data is moved to the data lake. So it's not Power Query at all. You're still moving your data somewhere else, and Microsoft will charge you after 10 gigabytes. And then the refreshes rates, you have 8 times a day or 48 times a day. It says Power Query for web enhancements. I call it like that. Defining when you are actually, this is defining entities. So when you're cleaning the data in the data flow, they're calling Power Query for the web, PQW. And as you've probably seen in the demos that are available there, it is a very limited Power Query. It's not near close to what Power Query can do either in Excel or Power BI. So they say here it is limited. We are going to continue developing. So they will close the gap between Power Query W, for the web, and Power Query in the coming months. And it says also the connectivity, that there are not a lot of sources available. They will close that gap too. And it says most new Power Query features used by Dataflows will be released simultaneously for both Power BI Desktop and Power BI for web, the online version, the one that Dataflows uses. So here it says the Dataflow experiences enhancements. They are going to improve on the visual Dataflow experiences, so you actually can, see what's going on when computing the different flows, and you have like a diagram picture in there. And there will be more enhancements to the calculation engine too. So I really hope that this brings some light into what a Dataflow is. I hope it makes it more clear. If you have questions, let me know, in the comment box down there. Discuss free about what you think about it. For me, this is, great for, people that are building the fundamentals of data management, the architecture. I wish that data scientists, business analysts, business users, power users will not have to do this. They can actually concentrate on the other parts of being a business analyst, which is actually creating valuable reports. So this is more like the management of data. And before that, I would rather have seen a data catalog instead, a data catalog that is actually be able to be in use, where you can discover sources easier. Maybe this will be the future of data catalogs. I don't know. But I think that is more needed than this. But it's probably because I don't do this type of, data job. So anyhow, let me know in the comment box what you think of this, and I'll see you again on Wednesday. If you want me to, I can make a Dataflow demonstration, to actually create a Dataflow from scratch to see how that works. And maybe I can do that for Wednesday. Okay, I will do it at any point, but if you tell me that you need it, I can do it earlier. So have a great Monday, and I'll see you again on Wednesday. Bye.